I have spent my career so far working and living in two very different worlds. The first is the world of politics, where I wrote speeches and made ads on 2 presidential campaigns. The second is the world of business, where I led special projects at a major technology company. I get asked the exact same question all the time. So tell me, do the politicians and the CEOs really hate each other as much as they look like they do on TV when they're screaming at each other all the time? That question makes me really sad. It makes me sad because it says something about our society that everyone just kind of assumes that our political leaders and our business leaders despise each other. But you know what makes me even sadder? It's actually more true than I would like to admit. Because I've seen firsthand how this collapsing relationship between our political leaders and our business leaders, this lack of decency, this lack of respect, this lack of fundamental communication is causing massive problems for society. Just look around. It's no secret that things are pretty screwed up. Our planet is literally on fire. Our democracy is teetering on the edge, and people all around us are angry for good reason. We are facing a set of 3 once-in-many-generation challenges. The first is climate change. The second is weakening belief in democracy. And the third is widespread inequality. And these aren't just government problems, and they're not just business problems. They are everyone problems. And while most of us inherently understand this, we don't talk about the next logical step, which is to solve these problems, we first need to fix the broken relationship between business and government. So what are these problems that we need to solve? I know it's hard talking about difficult issues like this, so I find it's helpful to talk about specific stories. So let's do that for each of these 3. First, let's talk about the climate. For decades, California has been allowed by the federal government to set stricter car emission standards than the rest of the country. But when President Trump came into office, he got into a lawsuit with the state of California to stop this from happening. General Motors, along with several other car makers, signed on to this lawsuit and actively encouraged President Trump to get involved. But then, on November 7th, 2020, President Biden won the 2020 election. And just 16 days later, General Motors made a big announcement. They said they were dropping their support of the lawsuit and were thrilled to work with the new administration to tackle climate change. What does it tell us about our society that one of the biggest companies in the country changed its mind on one of the most important problems facing our society just because an election happened? Ask yourself, is that what bold, values-driven corporate leadership looks like? Second, let's talk about the heart of those elections, our democracy. Most of us here have probably seen political ads online. In fact, some of you may even hate them, in which case, I'm really sorry. Some of them are definitely my fault. And some of you may have heard of something called the Federal Election Commission, or the FEC, the government agency responsible for regulating political ads. But here's what you may not know. The last time that the FEC updated its regulations on online political ads was in the year 2006. Yes, 2006. That was back before a tiny company called Facebook was even open to the public, and a full 5 years before Snapchat was even founded. So online political ads right now are pretty much the Wild West. And it's gotten so bad in recent cycles that the platforms like Google and Facebook have had to step in and set their own rules because the FEC was not doing its job. Ask yourself, Is that what strong government oversight of the business world looks like? Third, let's talk about our last generational challenge, widespread inequality. A few years ago, DoorDash had an unusual tipping policy. Dashers would go out and deliver food, and DoorDash would guarantee them a minimum payment to ensure that if a customer did not tip them, they would still bring a certain amount home. That's a great idea. But if a customer did tip them, DoorDash would lower their payment to the Dasher by the exact same amount as the tip. So DoorDash was basically like, thank you very much for the money, and put it in its pocket. There was a huge uproar when this came out. The CEO apologized, the policy was changed. And while nothing indicates that this was purposely malicious, ask yourself, where were the government regulators who should have been making rules to ensure that everyone in the gig economy could earn a fair wage? And where were the corporate executives who could have spoken to Dashers to understand how this policy would have impacted them? Now that we've talked through these three examples, I would bet there's at least one person in this audience who's thinking something like this. Geez, this guy's kind of naive. What does he expect? That all these folks in the political world and all these folks in the business world are just going to get along? Come on, live in reality. They have such opposing interests. And that's a fair point. Believe me, I've heard it before. But here is what that argument misses. Our political leaders and our business leaders have one very common interest, and that's keeping a stable society. And a stable society includes a stable planet, a stable democracy, and a stable people. Because here is a fundamental truth. You cannot make money and you cannot govern in the long run when everything around you is going crazy. That's why these aren't just government problems, and they're not just business problems. They are everyone problems. And it is naive, incredibly, ridiculously, laughably naive to believe that we can keep a stable society for decades into the future when our political leaders and our business leaders cannot even approach each other with goodwill. But here is the good news. Things are changing. Rebecca Henderson, a professor at Harvard Business School, has been writing over the past few years about the need to reimagine capitalism to fight climate change. And Larry Fink, the leader of one of the world's largest asset managers, has been writing recently about the need for companies to find profit and purpose. But we need all of our leaders to take action. And that's where everyone here today comes in. Because remember both of those companies that I just talked about, General Motors and DoorDash? Well, their CEOs are both Stanford MBA alumni. So that means in 10 years, maybe even 5, you could be them. So here's what we need to do. First, for all the business leaders here today, before making a big decision, ask yourself this question. In 10 years from now, will this decision make society a better place or a worse place? You might be surprised how many decisions have a clear-cut answer to that very simple question. Second, for all the political leaders here, before making a big decision, ask yourself this question. In 10 years from now, will this decision help those companies make the right choices for society? Because your job is to set the market's rules to incentivize those businesses to make good decisions, not just for their shareholders, but for all of us, and especially your constituents. Third, for all the students here today, the future leaders, there is a change coming to the way business interacts with the wider world. If you listen closely, you can hear it coming. Think deeply about the role you have to play in that movement. Think about the companies you join and the projects you take on, because they really do matter. Fourth, and this is for everyone here, do not wait for someone else to take the lead. We do not have the time to waste. We all need to get started on this today. Because remember, these aren't just government problems, and they're not just business problems. They are everyone problems, and we need to work together to solve them. So, if you're sitting here today, and you're already worried about what the plan is going to look like for your kids, or you can't even imagine what's going to happen in the next election, or you walk down the street and are horrified by the inequality you see all around you, you already know how high the stakes are. So, what are you going to do about it?